A cold night in Ethan Vance's Stratosphere penthouse. City lights quivered beyond the glass. Maya Rodriguez pushed the cart with Lily, sweeping the meeting corridor, hands firm, steps discreet. Ethan Vance leaned by the table, clutching crumpled paper, a silent laugh escaping him. The insolvency notice rested on the table. Lily pointed at a forgotten prototype on the table, babbling, "Talk to Grandma." Ethan lifted his gaze, turning distractedly to observe the gesture. Victor Sterling appeared at the door with a calculating smile, his eyes sharp. Managers whispered, their gazes turning to Maya Rodriguez. Maya dropped the bucket, trying to explain. Lily squeezed a teddy bear, her wide eyes fixed on Ethan. Victor pointed. Silence fell immediately. Do you crave stories with intense drama, chaos, and emotional tension? Then subscribe now to not miss a single narrative. Thank you for being here. Now, we return to our story. The oppressive silence of Ethan Vance's luxurious penthouse echoed the void within his soul, a chasm that not even the panoramic vista of the vibrant San Francisco metropolis, with its shimmering skyscrapers and distant hum, could fill. A millionaire by inheritance, yet an entrepreneur by vocation, Ethan watched his empire, Stratosphere Labs, crumble under the weight of stratospheric debts and erroneous decisions that he, in his youthful arrogance, had never imagined committing. The official letterhead, bearing the notice of impending insolvency in cold, impersonal script, burned in his hands. A testament to his resounding failure, he felt like a king without a kingdom, a man without purpose, drowning in his own hubris and, paradoxically, in a piercing solitude that had been his constant companion. The Italian designer furniture, the priceless artworks, and the polished marble adorning every corner of his apartment seemed to mock his misfortune, reflecting the image of a man who possessed everything, yet had nothing. Night after night, Ethan wandered through those opulent rooms, a glass of whiskey in hand, his eyes fixed on the cell phone screen that incessantly displayed disheartening news about his company's precipitous stock decline. Stratosphere Labs, once a beacon of innovation, was now a sinking vessel, and he, the captain, was exhausted without knowing where to steer. Bankruptcy was not merely a threat, it was a gigantic shadow engulfing him whole, taking with it not only his wealth, but also his identity, his pride. He had constructed a wall around himself, fortified by numbers and financial transactions, and now that wall was crumbling, revealing a vulnerable lost man. The Ethan who once exuded self-confidence, who dictated trends and closed multi-million-dollar deals with a smile, was now merely a husk, an executive on the precipice, seemingly without hope. In stark contrast to the darkness that enveloped Ethan the following morning, the Stratosphere Labs headquarters, an imposing glass and steel edifice that seemed to defy gravity, received a small ray of sunlight. Maya Rodriguez, the company's new janitor, arrived with a gleam in her eyes, a discreet smile upon her lips, and the strength of one who understood the dignity of hard labor. Pushing a stroller, where Lily, her 3-year-old daughter, observed the world with contagious curiosity, Maya was the personification of simplicity and resilience. Lily, with her attentive eyes and curly hair, was an explosion of life. A small point of light in the dim corridors Ethan had insisted be kept sterile and impersonal. The child's presence, an exception to the rigid, distraction-free work environment rule imposed by Ethan, was a silent miracle, a soft melody amidst the chaos that hung in the company's air. Maya, a devoted single mother, had obtained special dispensation to bring Lily to work on some days, when the local daycare had an unforeseen issue or she could not secure a babysitter. It was a temporary arrangement, a common plight for those who must strive relentlessly to make ends meet. But Maya did not lament. She saw in every challenge an opportunity to demonstrate her integrity and unconditional love for her daughter. While Stratosphere Labs' corridors reverberated with the heavy silence of crisis, Lily's joyful murmur, sometimes a muffled giggle, other times the babbling of a new word, was like a breath of fresh air, a forgotten melody beginning to permeate the space. The contrast between the cold opulence of the edifice, with its cutting-edge equipment and palpable atmosphere of tension, and the vibrant simplicity of Maya's life, full of human warmth and daily challenges, was striking. Ethan, submerged in his own tribulations and the anguish of impending insolvency, scarcely noticed the new employee and her small shadow. His mind was clouded by numbers, plummeting graphs, and the insistent voice of Victor Sterling, his partner, who constantly pressured him with drastic and ethically dubious solutions. He walked past Maya and Lily without registering their presences, his eyes fixed on a distant point, his posture stooped under the weight of a world that seemed to be collapsing. To him, Maya was merely another cog in the vast corporate machinery of Stratosphere Labs, and Lily, an insignificant detail, a background hum that barely penetrated his bubble of despair. There was no room in his mind to notice the gleam in the janitor's eyes or the child's innocent curiosity. Nevertheless, fate, with its peculiar irony, had already begun to weave its threads, intertwining the disparate lives of Ethan, the ruined millionaire, and Maya, the janitor imbued with hope, through the eyes of a small girl who, unbeknownst to her, held the key to a new chance. The frigid opulence of Stratosphere Labs, once a beacon of its meteoric ascent, now seemed a mausoleum of frustrated ambitions, where Ethan Vance felt increasingly cornered. The LED lights, once vibrant, pulsed like a dying heart over the vast, empty conference table, strewn with piles of loss statements and catastrophic financial reports. He had been there alone for hours, cold coffee beside a tablet, displaying relentless red graphs. Each number was a nail in his company's coffin, a cruel reminder of how complexity and the incessant pursuit of innovation had blinded him to the essential. His head felt heavy, a maelstrom of failed strategies and lost opportunities swirling in his exhausted mind. As Ethan sank deeper into his own storm, Maya Rodriguez, with her routine of quiet dignity, entered the room. Lily's stroller, with the little one asleep in tranquil slumber, oblivious to the room's gravity, followed her like a faithful shadow. Maya, with her damp cloth and bucket, moved with an almost poetic efficiency, dusting the designer furniture and immaculate glass. Her gaze, though focused on the task, carried the tenderness of a mother who, even while toiling to sustain her modest home, never averted her attention from her greatest treasure. She had no inkling of the torment afflicting her employer, only sensing the weight of the silence and the tension in the air, common characteristics of that office lately. Suddenly, a small murmur broke the oppressive quiet. Lily, who until then seemed immersed in sweet dreams, stirred in her stroller and opened her curious little eyes. Her chubby fingers pointed to a forgotten corner of the room, where an app prototype lay on a side table, dusty and abandoned. It was an old project, Ethan's attempt to create a revolutionary communication platform, which he had discarded for being too simple for the high-tech market. The girl's rosy lips moved, and with the clarity of a child who had not yet learned the barriers of shame, she babbled, "Talk to Grandma." Those 3 words, so unpretentious and laden with pure innocence, struck Ethan with the force of a lightning bolt. He, who had been immersed in financial equations and complex algorithms, abruptly raised his head, his heart quickening. Talk to Grandma. The abandoned prototype, which he had labeled a failure, was an application aimed at a niche for elderly communication, something he had disdained, always seeking the next great technological revolution. Lily's observation focused on the basic, universal need for family connection, on the simplicity of wanting to talk to a loved one, ignited a light in his clouded brain. The spark transformed into a fire. What if the solution for his company teetering on the abyss lay not in the complexity he so relentlessly pursued, but in the simplicity, in what he, in his genius arrogance, had discarded? The idea was so obvious, so simple, that he felt a fool for not having seen it sooner. How many people, like Lily's grandma, yearned for communication that was more accessible, more human, less focused on convoluted functionalities and more on connecting hearts? Stratosphere Labs, which prided itself on innovation, had lost the human touch, the real purpose behind technology. As Ethan's mind simmered with the new perspective, an embryonic plan beginning to take shape amidst the ruins of his former projects, a figure passed by the glass corridor leading to the conference room. Victor Sterling, his longtime partner, stopped abruptly. His cold, calculating gaze swept over the scene. Ethan, the genius in crisis, with an expression of surprise and perhaps hope, and beside him, the janitor Maya, with her daughter Lily in the stroller, pointing at one of the company's prototypes. A pang of suspicion and displeasure grew in Victor's chest. Victor, who always viewed the world through the lenses of power and control, disliked surprises, especially those involving people he deemed out of place. The presence of the janitor and the child too close to Ethan, his partner who seemed to be losing his mind along with their fortune, was a warning sign. What could that child be doing there? And why did Ethan seem so engrossed by her presence? He had already noticed Ethan appearing somewhat detached lately, a shadow of the ruthless businessman he used to be. That scene, with its almost bucolic simplicity amidst the corporate chaos, unsettled Victor's meticulous world. His eyes narrowed, assessing the situation. Ethan, in his vulnerability, could be easily influenced. What if that woman, Maya, or worse, that child, was planting ideas in his partner's head, diverting him from the plans he, Victor, had for Stratosphere Labs' future? To Victor, the company was not merely a business. It was an empire he was determined to dominate, and Ethan, once a valuable partner, was becoming an impediment. The image of Lily pointing to the prototype and Ethan's fixed gaze on the child etched themselves into Victor's mind as a veiled threat. He offered a forced smile, a gesture that did not reach his icy eyes, and continued on his way, but the seed of intrigue was already planted. The seemingly innocent scene had awakened a dormant monster within him, an instinct for self-preservation and control that would compel him to act without mercy to protect his interests. What Ethan perceived as a glimmer of hope, Victor saw as a dangerous distraction, an alien element that needed to be removed so he could finally consolidate absolute power over Stratosphere Labs. The air in the conference room, once heavy with despair, now vibrated with a different energy for Ethan. Lily's idea, so unpretentious, had ignited a flame. He glanced at Maya, who continued cleaning with her usual discretion, and at little Lily, who was now playing with her own tiny fingers. Little did he know that this moment of epiphany, that seed of redemption, was already being observed and marked by an enemy who would not hesitate to use any means to crush not only the new idea, but also the very people who had inspired it. Ethan Vance, oblivious to the shadow deepening over his newfound connections, plunged headfirst into realizing the project. The energy he once funneled into accumulating wealth and the cold calculus of numbers now transformed into a contagious passion, fueled by a purpose extending beyond mere profit. Lily's vision, with its purity and keen observation, had unlocked something profound within Ethan, an entrepreneur who considered himself complete, yet was, in truth, hollow. He spent sleepless nights in his luxurious, yet empty penthouse, no longer tormented by impending insolvency, but rather propelled by a creative fever, sketching prototypes, compiling market data, and designing functionalities for the communication app for seniors. Each line of imagined code, Each conceived interface carried with it the image of little Lily, a constant reminder that the greatest innovation often resides in simplicity and empathy. The day of the presentation to the Stratosphere Labs board arrived, shrouded in palpable tension. The meeting room, once a stage for heated discussions about imminent bankruptcy, now buzzed with the curiosity and skepticism of the directors. Victor Sterling, in his impeccable suit and with a cold smile on his lips, observed Ethan with a mixture of disdain and unease. He had bet on his partner's downfall, on his complete ruin, and this sudden turnaround was a blow to his meticulously orchestrated plans. Ethan, unlike the arrogant and distant man he once was, entered the room with a different demeanor. There was a seriousness in him, a conviction that silenced the murmurs. "Gentlemen, Stratosphere Labs will not merely survive," Ethan began, his voice firm, yet with a contained emotion that surprised everyone. "We are going to redefine our purpose. We are going to innovate for real." He projected a visually impactful presentation onto the screen, eschewing the usual graphs and numbers that once dominated his meetings. Instead, there were images of smiling seniors interacting with technology in a simple and intuitive way. He spoke of the aging population, the solitude many faced, and the urgent need for a tool that would connect generations, offer support, and promote digital inclusion in an accessible manner. The initial skepticism was almost palpable. Some directors exchanged glances, whispering about Ethan's romantic turn. "An app for grandpas and grandmas. Ethan, we're talking about saving a tech giant, not a social project." One of the oldest board members, a conservative, risk-averse man accustomed to the exorbitant profits of the past, snapped. But Ethan was undeterred. He presented market data he had compiled in record time, showing the colossal untapped niche and the potential for financial return. He spoke of the intuitive interface, the security and the simplicity that would be the pillars of the new product. "Our technology can and should be used to improve people's lives, not just to generate more digits in bank accounts," he argued, his passion transforming into an irrefutable case. Gradually, the room began to yield to his vision. Ethan's passion was contagious, and the numbers, once cold and terrifying, now seemed to align with the promise of a more human and profitable future. The majority, to Victor's growing irritation, was convinced. The company, which weeks ago hovered on the brink of collapse, began to show the first signs of recovery. News of Stratosphere Labs' new direction spread through the corridors, reigniting hope among employees. The work environment, once heavy and disheartening, gained new momentum, a cautious yet real optimism. Small contracts began to emerge, investors showed interest in the new proposal, and specialized media began to report on the bold humanitarian shift of the struggling giant. Victor Sterling, however, seethed in his glass-walled office, which offered a panoramic view of the metropolis. He had planned Ethan's downfall with a surgeon's precision, aiming to seize total control of Stratosphere Labs. Ethan's unexpected success, propelled by such an insignificant and plebeian idea stemming from a janitor and her daughter, he thought with revulsion, was a personal outrage. To Victor, Maya and Lily's presence at Stratosphere Labs headquarters was not merely an annoyance. It symbolized Ethan's weakness and loss of focus. They represented the intrusion of the common and disorganized world into his universe of control and power. That vestige of humanity in Ethan was a direct threat to his own values and ambitions. He could not allow the company, which he saw as his by right, to be rescued by a commoner's idea, as he termed it in his darkest thoughts. With the calculating coldness that defined him, Victor began to act in the shadows. He had eyes and ears in every corner of the company, spreading seeds of distrust with the subtlety of a slow poison. His comments were always disguised as concern, as zeal for the company. "Isn't Maya a bit distracted lately?" he murmured to a manager as he watched the janitor work with her usual dedication. It's natural. With a child around, one tends to lose a little focus, don't you think? He insinuated, adjusting his tie knot. He planted doubts about Maya's competence, questioning her ability to maintain the discretion and efficiency required in a high-tech environment. A child in the office. However adorable, it's not the safest or most professional environment for Stratosphere Labs, is it, folks? He commented to other directors, with an air of one concerned for Lily's safety, when in truth, his only objective was to undermine Maya's image and drive Ethan away from them. Minor incidents, strategically orchestrated or exaggerated, began to surface. A coffee cup, accidentally knocked over near important documents, was discreetly attributed to Maya's distraction. A crucial report, displaced from the folder where it should have been, appeared elsewhere, with Victor making sure to ask, with a tone of false concern, "Maya, have you seen this document? It was here on Ethan's desk, now it's gone. Did someone accidentally move it?" Maya, with her unshakable integrity, did not perceive the malice behind these questions. She apologized, attributing the minor mishaps to her own inattention or the accelerated pace of work, never suspecting she was being ensnared in a cruel trap. The final blow, meticulously planned by Victor Sterling, was not long in coming, striking Maya Rodriguez at the most vulnerable point of her already fragile routine. Stratosphere Labs headquarters, which once seemed a place of opportunity, transformed into the stage for a cruel trap. It was a bustling Tuesday, with tension hanging in the air like a heavy mist, for the company was on the verge of closing a colossal contract, capable of turning the tide of impending insolvency. Ethan Vance, exhausted and with deep circles under his eyes, spent hours poring over papers and screens, the hope in his gaze wavering between exhaustion and urgency. On that crucial day, however, the vital document for the negotiation, the final contract with the decisive investment clause, simply vanished from Ethan's desk, as if it had evaporated into the rarefied air of the high-tech office. Panic spread like wildfire. Ethan, his voice choked by disbelief and despair, searched for the document in every corner of his office, overturning piles of reports and projects. Victor, with an almost rehearsed calm, appeared at his door, his eyes fixed on Ethan with an expression of feigned concern. "What is it, Ethan? You look pale," he said, his voice soft, yet with a subtle hint of ill-concealed satisfaction. When Ethan explained the contract's disappearance, Victor's reaction was immediate and calculated. "We must check the security cameras. It's protocol," he suggested, already with the tablet in hand, as if prepared for the inevitable. The images, displayed on the screen with disturbing clarity, showed Maya, minutes before the contract's disappearance, performing her cleaning routine in Ethan's office. She wiped down the furniture, tidied some papers on the desk, and, in a casual movement, pushed a pile of documents aside to clean the surface beneath. Nothing in the images proved she had taken the contract or even intentionally touched it. She was merely a woman doing her work, with her usual diligence. However, Victor did not require proof. He needed a narrative, and he constructed it with cruel mastery. "Look closely, Ethan," Victor began, pointing at the screen with an accusing finger. She was alone in the room, precisely where the contract lay, and then, poof, the document vanished. Victor's narrative regarding Maya's negligence and lack of professionalism was relentless. He resurrected each of the minor incidents previously fabricated: the spilled coffee, the disorganized files, the misplaced folder, and wove them into a tapestry of evidence that painted Maya as careless, perhaps even malicious. "It isn't the first time something like this has occurred, is it? Minor accidents that cause us significant problems," Victor insinuated, gazing at Ethan with an expression of feigned regret, yet one that beheld the raw, unvarnished truth. Ethan, his mind clouded by the pressure of impending insolvency and the urgency of saving Stratosphere Labs, felt a knot in his stomach. He yearned to defend Maya, the woman whose daughter had ignited a new flame of hope within his breast. Yet Victor's cold logic and the apparent coincidence of the images were cornering him. The company was at stake, and Victor manipulated this tension with masterful skill. "We cannot afford to have someone like that in a position of trust, Ethan," Victor continued, his voice grave, "especially now, with so much hanging in the balance. Imagine if the contract fell into the hands of our competitors, or if it was simply discarded by mistake." The seed of doubt, planted with such meticulous care, blossomed in a garden of urgency and despair. Ethan, still focused on the company's recovery and under Victor's manipulative influence, hesitated to defend Maya with the necessary vehemence. The voice he had found to champion the new project seemed to have been stifled by the weight of the accusations and the pressure from his partner. He wished to believe in Maya's innocence, but her image in the room, followed by the contract's disappearance, was a powerful blow against his intuition. Maya was summoned to the meeting room. Her eyes, once filled with tranquil dignity, now reflected an agonizing confusion. She listened to the accusations, Victor's voice sharp as a blade, Ethan's strangely distant and hesitant. "Madam Maya Rodriguez, given the evidence and the history of incidents during your shift, we are compelled to take drastic measures," Victor declared, without circumlocution. "The contract vital to the company vanished from my office after your presence. We have no other option but to deem you responsible for severe negligence or worse, sabotage." A chill ran through Maya's veins. Sabotage? Her? The woman who prided herself on her honesty above all else? Humiliated and unjustly accused of theft or sabotage, Maya felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. Victor's words were like stones hurled against her soul, while Ethan's silence was an overwhelming burden. There was no opportunity for explanation, for defense. Her dismissal was summary, immediate. "Your belongings will be sent to your home. You are dismissed. Effective immediately," Victor concluded, with a frigidity that cut through the air. She was forbidden even to retrieve her belongings from her locker, treated like a dangerous criminal. Maya's dignity was trampled, her pride irreparably wounded. She exited the room, her eyes brimming with tears, her heart shattered, feeling the weight of the curious and judgmental stares of the employees who watched her pass. The hallway she once traversed with her head held high now seemed a tunnel of shame. In the reception area of Stratosphere Labs, Lily awaited her mother. Drawing with a colored pencil on a notepad a kind receptionist had given her. The little girl, with her purity and sensibility, sensed the shift in the atmosphere even before seeing her mother. The air felt heavy, the whispers grew louder, and the gazes seemed strange. When Maya emerged from the elevator, her face etched with sorrow and injustice, Lily dropped her pencil. The girl's eyes, accustomed to seeing her mother smiling and full of strength, now encountered an expression of profound pain. The coldness in the gazes of the security guards accompanying Maya to the door, the haste in removing her from the building, all of it was an injustice that Lily, in her innocence, did not fully comprehend, yet felt in every fiber of her small being. The scene profoundly marked the small family, abruptly severing them from the environment that, ironically, had been the source of new and promising hope for them all. The echo of injustice seemed to reverberate through the now silent corridors of Stratosphere Labs as the absence of Maya and Lily hung like a dense fog over Ethan's conscience. The company, ironically, was living its days of glory. The application, named Grand Connect, had become a national phenomenon in record time, embraced by millions of users seeking to optimize their routines and digital interactions. Ethan, the visionary behind the idea, was now celebrated as a genius, his image emblazoned in business magazines and television shows. Profits poured in, Stocks soared, and Stratosphere Labs, once on the brink of an abyss, solidified itself as a giant in the American tech market. It seemed like a modern fairy tale, with the once arrogant entrepreneur rediscovering success. However, for Ethan, each applause sounded hollow. Every extra cent in the bank account seemed to weigh like lead in his soul. The luxurious penthouse, once a refuge for his solitude, now felt like a mausoleum of his own guilt. The emptiness was palpable, a black hole that all the world's wealth could not fill. The images of Lily, with her curious eyes and infectious laughter, and of Maya, with her unwavering dignity and her look of profound sadness on the day of her dismissal, haunted his thoughts. He saw the innocence of the girl, the helplessness of the mother, and the cruelty of the injustice he not only allowed but by omission endorsed. The truth was a slow poison. Stratosphere Labs' success was intrinsically linked to Lily's idea, and he had paid for that success with the misery of those who inspired it. Deep down, Ethan knew, with a painful certainty, that Maya's dismissal had been a vile maneuver by Victor, and he, Ethan, had been a coward for not intervening. Guilt, like an insistent parasite, gnawed at him from within. He began to act discreetly, almost paranoiacally, attempting to alleviate the burden that weighed on Maya and Lily. He created an anonymous bank account and, using intermediaries, began to deposit significant sums of money. It was not a fortune that would lift them from poverty, but enough to ensure rent, food on the table, perhaps a new toy for Lily. He imagined Maya discovering the deposits, perhaps confused but hoped she would accept, thinking of her daughter. On other occasions, he left envelopes of money in strategic locations near Maya's modest home, or asked flower delivery services to leave small gifts for Lily, always with anonymous notes saying only, "For Lily, with love." It was a palliative for his tormented conscience, a desperate attempt to redeem himself without facing the naked truth of his actions. Not satisfied with financial aid, Ethan also made veiled attempts to open doors for Maya in the job market. He utilized his network of contacts, calling friends and colleagues at other companies, suggesting they give a chance to an extremely competent and dedicated professional, without, of course, mentioning Maya's name directly. He hoped his prestige would suffice for some of his contacts to investigate and, upon finding Maya, hire her. He believed that with a good job, Maya could rebuild her life and secure a better future for Lily, away from the shadow of Stratosphere Labs and Victor. However, Victor Sterling was not a man who left loose ends. His control over means and his network of influence were vast and relentless. Every attempt by Ethan, however discreet, was intercepted or sabotaged before it even had a chance to prosper. Victor had eyes and ears everywhere, and his nose for threats was keen. When Ethan tried to help Maya financially, deposits were mysteriously blocked, or money went missing before reaching its destination. Gifts for Lily never arrived, or were replaced by items of questionable value, making Maya even more suspicious of any anonymous help. Ethan's attempts to secure new employment for Maya were the most frustrating. Whenever one of Ethan's contacts showed interest in a mystery candidate, Victor acted swiftly. He planted false information, spread malicious rumors, or even used his power to pressure companies to reject Maya, painting her as a problematic employee with complex personal issues and a tendency to cause instability. "People like her cause more problems than solutions, my dear," Victor would whisper into the right ears with his cynical smile. Maya, not understanding why, saw every door close. Every hope of a new beginning vanish like smoke. Her resilience was tested daily, but for Lily, she refused to give up. Victor, aware of Ethan's actions, wasted no time using it to his advantage. He did not confront Ethan directly about the deposits or jobs, but wove a web of psychological manipulation. "Ethan, my friend," he would say, with a tone of false concern during a board meeting, We need to keep Stratosphere Labs' image impeccable. Any association with problematic individuals can tarnish our name now that we are at our peak. You know, rumors spread easily, and the press loves a scandal. He looked at Ethan with a calculating glint in his eyes, a veiled threat. We wouldn't want your old connections to be misinterpreted, would we? Especially now that the company is so visible. It could be a disaster, and the market is cruel. Each insinuation from Victor tightened the knot in Ethan's throat. He knew Victor referred to Maya and, indirectly, to his own attempts to help. Victor was using Ethan's guilt against him, turning his compassion into a weapon. The threat of exposing his improper connections with the former employee, even if false, was real. In a society where image was golden, and where a rich and powerful man could easily be brought down by a scandal of inappropriate relationship or favoritism, Ethan was trapped. He felt chained, unable to openly help Maya, and simultaneously corroded by inaction. The vision of Stratosphere Labs' success, once his greatest pride, had now become the symbol of his greatest shame and his imprisonment. The situation reached an unsustainable point. Ethan spent sleepless nights, reliving every detail of Maya's dismissal, every glance from Lily. He was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. The weight of conscience was a heavier burden than impending bankruptcy. He realized that success without integrity was not success. It was an empty facade. With each forced smile in interviews and every champagne toast, he felt hypocrisy crushing him. He could not continue. That path Victor had laid out for him, paved with lies and injustices, was not his. One night, as he watched the sleeping city from his penthouse, Ethan had an epiphany. He could not allow Victor to continue destroying lives, including his own. He could not live with the guilt of having abandoned Maya and Lily. He needed to do the right thing, not just for them, but for himself. Redemption would not come through anonymous deposits or frustrated attempts. It would come through truth and justice. He had to confront Victor no matter the cost. In the following days, Ethan began to operate in the shadows, just like Victor, but with a different purpose. He revisited old company documents, financial transactions, forgotten emails. He spoke with employees Victor had unjustly dismissed or intimidated, promising them protection and a fair future. He discovered a trail of financial irregularities, fraudulent contracts, and money laundering schemes Victor had been orchestrating for years, using Stratosphere Labs as a facade. Victor, in his arrogance, had left crumbs, small pieces of evidence that, when gathered, formed a devastating picture of corruption. Ethan, with the help of a trusted lawyer he had kept secret, assembled a robust dossier. The final confrontation occurred during an extraordinary shareholders' meeting, convened by Ethan under the pretext of presenting new expansion plans. Victor was confident, smiling at investors, believing everything was under his control. However, when Ethan began to present not future plans, but evidence of Victor's past, the villain's smile crumbled. Ethan exposed every fraud, every manipulation, every injustice, culminating with the truth about Maya's dismissal and the sabotage of his attempts to help. The room fell silent, only the sound of Ethan's firm voice filling the air. Victor tried to deny, shout, threaten, but the evidence was irrefutable. Ethan had recorded conversations, obtained bank statements, emails, and testimonies. At the height of the chaos, the police, previously alerted by Ethan, entered the room and arrested Victor Sterling right there, under the shocked eyes of everyone. The villain's fall was spectacular, a sensational network news report, and Stratosphere Labs was saved, not just from bankruptcy, but from the corruption that tainted it. With Victor out of the picture, Ethan acted swiftly to repair the damage. He convened a press conference and, before the cameras and microphones, made an emotional statement. He admitted his mistakes, his cowardice, and publicly asked for forgiveness from Maya Rodriguez and little Lily. He explained the truth about the dismissal and the injustice they suffered, promising to restore Maya's dignity and ensure she had every opportunity she deserved. He offered Maya a position as Director of Community Impact Programs at Stratosphere Labs, an area he intended to expand, focusing on digital inclusion for underserved communities. Maya, watching the press conference from her modest home, was shocked, but a tear of relief streamed down her face. She did not expect forgiveness, but truth and justice were a balm for her wounded soul. A few days later, Ethan went to her home, not as the powerful CEO, but as a humble and remorseful man. He apologized again, eye to eye, and explained everything, from Lily's inspiration to Victor's manipulation. Maya, with her integrity and tact, accepted the apologies, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, but made it clear that trust would take time to rebuild. Ethan fulfilled his promise. Maya accepted the position and, with her intelligence and dedication, transformed Stratosphere Labs' social department into a success. Lily, now with access to a more stable and happy life, flourished. Ethan became a constant figure in both their lives, not as a distant millionaire, but as a friend, a protector, and a paternal figure for Lily. He learned that true wealth was not in bank figures, but in integrity, compassion, and human bonds. Stratosphere Labs prospered even further, now under ethical and humanized leadership. Ethan's redemption was not instantaneous, but a continuous process. He became a different man, more empathetic, more human. Maya, in turn, found not only security, but a new purpose and an unusual partnership with the man who once hurt her, but who had redeemed himself. The thread of hope whispered by Lily not only saved a company, but transformed lives, proving that, even in the greatest falls, the chance to start anew and do the right thing always exists. The story of Ethan, Maya, and Lily is a powerful reminder that true success is built upon a foundation of ethics and humanity. It is about the courage to face one's own mistakes and fight for justice, even when the world seems to conspire against you. May this journey inspire us to always seek the truth and value people, for they, and not money, give meaning to our existence. If this story of triumph and redemption moved you, do not forget to like, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories, and share your thoughts on Ethan's life-altering transformation in the comments.